and welcome to UK Gaming Network. I'm Brian, also known as UK Gen Zoidberg, and thank you for joining me for the finale of my top 100 games for the ZX Spectrum. Across 3 previous videos, I've counted down 90 great games from 100 to 11, but it's finally time to reveal what games are in my top 10, including my choice for the best ZX Spectrum game of all time. If you've watched the previous 3 videos, you probably have some idea of what my taste in games is like, so this top 10 may not come as much of a surprise. As previously stated, this top 100 is based on nothing more other than my own personal opinion, and therefore there are going to be some games that I haven't included that you probably think I should have done. Please let me know what your top 10 is in the comments. Now though, without further ado, let's get to my choice for number 10. Budget game releases were a huge part of my childhood. After receiving my pocket money on a Saturday morning, I would spend hours scouring the shelves of my local game store for the latest releases from the likes of Mastertronic, Zeppelin Games or Players. I honestly lost count of the number of Codemasters games that I bought with the word simulator in the title. However, I think my choice for the best budget release of them all may surprise a few people. Thrust was released for just $1.99 by Firebird on their Silver range, and it remains just as good to play today as it was in 1986. Your objective on each level is simple: capture an orb and take it back into orbit, but as the levels progress, you'll find the orb deeper and deeper underground. Get further into the game and you'll have to contend with things like reverse gravity and invisible walls as well. Whether you play cautiously or in a more gung-ho manner, the game will reward your approach, and it's incredibly addictive stuff. I enjoyed Thrust too, but to a much lesser degree, as I think it overcomplicated the gameplay. The simplicity of this first game is absolutely one of its main strengths, and that's why I love it. Even today, any game that emulates the Thrust style is instantly on my radar, but I especially enjoyed Fly Harder and Gravity Force 2 on the Amiga. Almost every blockbuster movie in the 1980s got turned into a video game of some kind, and whilst most of them weren't particularly memorable, there were quite a few gems as well. RoboCop, The Great Escape and Batman are all examples of a license done right, but my favourite Spectrum game based on a movie comes from a very unlikely source. Sylvester Stallone's 1986 ultra-violent action movie Cobra was never going to bother awards voters, but it was an inexplicably huge hit at the box office. Ocean Software snagged the license to make the game, and they wisely handed it to Joffa Smith. There have been multiple games of his on this list already: Green Beret, Hysteria, Hyperactive and Hypersports, but Cobra is the first game that I think of whenever somebody mentions his name. Whereas the film was unintentionally funny, the game knowingly mocks itself. Instead of up, down, left, right and fire, the redefined keys screen has up, down, left, right and murder as the options, and that pretty much tells you all you need to know. The gameplay is pure arcade fun, and you'll always feel like you can beat your high score next time. It can be a little frustrating, but that's just an example of how addictive it is, and how much you want to do better next time. Minor Willie, Jack the Nipper, Saberman, Wally Week, Dizzy. There have been many characters over the years that have made their way into the hearts of Spectrum fans, but I think there's one that stands head and shoulders above all of them. The star of 6 games released between 1984 and 1990, if you count free cover tape spin-offs that is. I am of course talking about Gremlin's Monty Mole. 1987's Auf Wiedersehen Monty is easily the series' peak, and continued Monty's prison escape as he flees across Europe to a secluded island. All of the game's brilliant designed screens are laid out exactly like a map of Europe, and packed with amusing little Easter eggs. It's superbly playable and a massive challenge. You won't be completing this one quickly, I guarantee it. And if you play the 128K version, it's all accompanied by a fantastic piece of music from Ben Dalglish. Somehow, it didn't even make the nominations for Best Music of 1987 in Crash Magazine's End of Year Awards. I find that astonishing. At least the game did win Best Platform Game though. As far as I'm concerned, the series ended here. What's the first stealth game you remember playing? Lots of people consider it a fairly modern introduction to gaming, and by that I mean the 90s. But what if I told you that the first stealth game I remember playing was from 1985? Putting you in the role of a ninja and featuring lots of sneaking and silent takedowns, it's a game that I've returned to over and over again over the years, including a recent re-release on the Switch. Saboteur by Clive Townsend may seem pretty simple at first, but the more you play it, the more you realise its scope. It's a game that doesn't tell you anything and expects you to work out where to go for yourself. This made the sense of discovery incredible. The map is simply huge and there's so much here to uncover. I can remember being blown away the first time I found that there was an underground railway. With 10 progressively more complex difficulty levels to test your skill, you'll really start to know every nook and cranny of the map, as you'll find routes that you once took are now blocked off, or there are platforms missing. The sequel was similarly enjoyable, but felt like more of the same at times, and I always found myself coming back to the original. Ultimate Play the Game might just be the most well-known publisher of Spectrum games, with a string of memorable, high-profile games to their name. It's probably going to be surprising to quite a few people though to learn that my favourite game of theirs is probably also their most simple. It's a fantastically simple arcade game that I have happily sat and played for hours on end on an Xbox. Jetpack is a superb single-screen arcade shooter where you have to contend with a new type of alien threat each and every level. You start by putting together your rocket and then collect enough fuel for it to take off. It's a brilliantly simple concept, executed perfectly, with just the right level of difficulty to keep you coming back for more. If this was an actual arcade machine, it would sit happily alongside the classics of that era. When Rare made a belated follow-up for Xbox Live Arcade, they included the Spectrum version as an extra, and even tied an achievement to it, requiring you to complete all 16 levels, which, trust me, is not easy. Thankfully, you'll have great fun trying though. Everything that I knew about comic books came from gaming in the 1980s. Hard to imagine today, but it was through playing Spectrum games that I discovered all the characters from the likes of 2000 AD and Marvel. The absolute best game based on a comic book though was plucked from the pages of The Eagle, and it's a game that even two pretty decent sequels couldn't manage to top. Dan Dare Pilot of the Future is one of the first action-adventure games that I remember completing. And the reason I remember it is because of the tension that I felt as the clock ticked down on my final escape. Climbing back into my ship with just 1 second to spare was a huge relief. The game gives you 2 hours to complete your mission, which you may think is generous, but having Dan fall unconscious for 10 minutes every time his energy runs out was an excellent gameplay trick. This meant that rather than give you a limited number of lives, the game would instead end when your clock hit 0. It's fantastically well presented too, with comic-style panels appearing in the corner at key moments, with a great sense of location to the levels. Growing up, access to arcades was extremely limited to me, and the kind of thing that I only got to do on family holidays. This meant that a lot of my experience of classic coin-op games was through their Spectrum conversions. There was one game though that I loved so much on the Spectrum that when I finally got to play the arcade version years later, I was stunned to realise how much better the Spectrum version was. Renegade's sequel, which I placed at number 17, may be more highly rated by many, but I think it lacks the fun factor and intensity of the first game. The feeling of being surrounded by 6 or 7 thugs at once makes each of the levels here an intense test of your skills. It doesn't overcomplicate things with too many moves, even on the 128K version, which added an overhead throw. And the controls work brilliantly. I've always felt that having each level's boss character wait around in the background added an extra level to the gameplay, and the time limits mean that you really need to get stuck into each brawl. Being able to loop the levels after defeating the final boss makes it perfect for score-based challenges too. Apologies for getting the unbelievably catchy music stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Now we come to my top 3, and honestly, these next 3 games could be put in any order and I'd still be happy. All of them are what I consider to be the best examples of what the Spectrum could do. This game at number 3 is actually the 5th game to come from a programmer and designer who is so beloved that he even got a PC and Amiga game dedicated to him in 2019. A defining characteristic of all Rafael Cecco's games is that they make full use of the Spectrum's limited colour palette. Exelon looks absolutely fantastic with the minimal of colour clash, and each screen is laid out to perfection. Every single death that I suffered was down to my own impatience, making me want to do better next time, and the choice of routes through some sections only adds to the replay value. How good the Spectrum version remains to this day has only made the disappointment of the 16-bit versions get worse over time. All they had to do was make the graphics more detailed and leave the gameplay alone, but they couldn't even do that. Stick with the Spectrum original and you won't regret it. There have been many games that push the capabilities of the Spectrum to the absolute limits. The likes of Hard Driving and Stunt Car Racer, as well as the Freescape games Driller and Darkside, were all games that impressed at the time of their release. But the thing with 3D graphics is that they don't age particularly well, and most of those games are pretty much unplayable today. My number 2 game though is one that looks just as amazing today as it did the first time I loaded it up. The rotating tower effect in Nebulous remains truly impressive even all these years later, especially when you consider that the entire game loads in one go. How programmer John Phillips managed to fit all this into just 48K is miraculous. Thankfully, the gameplay is of a similar quality to the visuals, with each level testing you in different ways. The feeling of devastation when a mistimed jump resulted in my falling all the way back to the start of a level was unlike any other game. Thankfully, the enemies don't respawn, so making my way back up again was less of a grind than it could have been. My only real disappointment is that there are only 8 levels, as I could have happily played through a lot more of them. If I'm being honest, the game at number 1 was probably always going to be my top choice when I set about making this list. I toyed with the idea of putting Nebulous here instead, but I honestly just kept returning to this game. And that's simply because every time somebody asks me what my favourite games of all time are, this features in my top 10, alongside the likes of Half-Life 2, Super Mario Kart and Sensible Soccer. That game is Head Over Heels, a truly sublime isometric platform game with what I would argue are the best graphics of any Spectrum game. John Rittman and Bernie Drummond had laid the groundwork for this game with Batman a year earlier, and both games do indeed share a lot of similarities. The decision to split the various abilities between 2 characters who could also work together was a stroke of genius, and every time the game forces them to go their own separate ways, you'll find yourselves hoping it's not for long. It's a testament to how good the Spectrum version is that every other version is exactly the same, just with coloured in graphics. Please don't buy the version on the Switch though, as the developers of that one have ruined it by adding things that were never meant to be there. I think this game will remain one of my all-time favourites forevermore, so it's a more than justified number 1. Thank you for watching this long in the making top 100 games for the Spectrum. I've really enjoyed going back through all the games of my childhood, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. Like I said in part 1, I've played well over 1,000 games in putting together this list, and there's probably 1,000 more that I could have played as well. If you think that there are any glaring omissions, please do tell me what they are in the comments. I always like to hear what your opinions are as much as I like sharing my own, so that you don't miss out on any future videos coming to the channel. Maybe I'll look into doing all of this again at some time in the future for one of the other systems of my childhood. Please tell me what system you'd most like to see me cover if I do. Until next time, happy retro gaming everybody, and I'll see you soon.